Just getting connected and on the phone with prospects when you're trying to get into an account or try to generate leads, just getting a hold of them is the biggest challenge that you'll face. You could have the best product at the best price. You could also have the best sales script and be extremely well prepared to deliver your sales pitch. But if you can't get on the phone or get connected with the prospects that you're trying to reach out to, none of that will do you any good. So just getting connected is the biggest challenge that you'll face. And if we look at all of these things on the right side here, you really don't have any control over any of those. You can't make prospects less busy. You can't impact the number of salespeople that are calling the same people that you're calling. You can't control any of these. And I'm a firm believer that don't worry about all of the things you can't control. Focus on what you can. And while getting connected is extremely challenging, there are some things you can control, and we're going to talk about those here today. I'm going to provide 3 different things that you can control and work on and change that can improve your ability to get connected. The first one being, I'm going to talk to you about creating a prospecting cadence. Then we'll talk about organizational movement. And then what we will talk about is concentrated prospecting. So even though all of us have to face those exact same challenges, there are some very clear and practical improvements and changes you can make in these 3 areas, and we'll talk about those here, starting with prospecting cadence. So we're focusing on improving our ability to connect with prospects. And there's many different ways to reach out to prospects, but we're going to focus on 3 of the main ways that you have to communicate with them. The first one being cold calling, cold emailing, and voicemail messages, which, by the way, are the 3 previous training modules just before this one. So if you've missed any of those, I would recommend you definitely go back and watch all of those. But regarding cold calling, a common question or something to think about is, how many times should I call? If you're having trouble getting a hold of someone, how many times should you try to reach out to them where you're trying to make sure that you're not calling too much or that you're not walking away prematurely? How many emails should you send when you're doing cold emailing? And how many voicemail messages should you leave? So the prospecting cadence that I'm going to provide you here today will answer all of these questions, and it'll provide a structure that you can operate within to have more clarity around how many times to reach out. Now, when we talk about prospecting cadence, cadence actually refers to the rhythm of our outreach attempts. And similar to like a musician who's playing an instrument, they use a rhythm for the number of beats in the music, and the rhythm is impacted by the different instruments that are part of that music. And so in the same way that musicians or a band uses rhythm to create music, you can use your cold calls, your cold emails, and your voicemail attempts to create a rhythm for your cold outreach. And the structure that you can build all that within will help you to create your prospecting cadence. And by having a good rhythm or a good effective prospecting cadence, you can improve your ability to get connected with the prospects that you're trying to reach. So we're going to answer the question here today of how many times should you reach out, how many times should you call and email. But I can tell you right now, most likely where you're at right now, you are probably not reaching out enough. And you're probably moving on prematurely in terms of the prospects that you're trying to pursue. Let me give you a common example that many salespeople might do. So a salesperson might often start with sending an email to a prospect. Hi, this is who I work for. This is what I sell. Are you available for a meeting? The prospect doesn't return the email. Then the salesperson might call, gets the voicemail box, doesn't leave a voicemail, calls again, voicemail box, doesn't leave a voicemail. Now on the 3rd attempt or 4th attempt, maybe they call again. At this point, they're going to leave a voicemail message. Prospect doesn't call back. Because they left a voicemail message, they might hold off for a little while. After they leave that voicemail message, they might pause and hold off a little before continuing to contact them. Prospect still doesn't call back. Salesperson tries again. At this point, gets the voicemail box again, doesn't leave a voicemail message. And at this point, the salesperson makes the assumption, you know what, this prospect, they're not answering my call. They're not responding to me. They're not calling me back. They must not want to talk to me or be interested in what I'm selling. So I'm going to move on and try to reach other prospects. And that's a fair conclusion to make after all of this outreach. But the reality is that if we keep in mind, prospects are away from their desk a lot. So with just a few call attempts, it's very likely that they were never at their desk during these call attempts. We've talked about how Prospects rarely return voicemail calls. Sometimes they delete voicemail messages without listening to them. So our conclusion from the assumptions that we're operating with is that it's reasonable for a salesperson to reach out this many times and walk away. But it's premature because this level of outreach does not mean that the prospect's not interested. You have to reach out to prospects a lot because they're away from their desk and because they're getting sold so much and because there's so much competition. You have to reach out to them more than this. And this is just one example to show you that many times a salesperson might walk away thinking that they've reached out enough, or they're starting to reach out too much and starting to bug the prospect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a similar process to that includes more outreach, and you can either copy this prospect and use it as your prospecting cadence. But one thing at a minimum, you can look at the process that I'm going to show you and see that the other process was not reaching out enough, because this is the way that I recommend it. And it's built around actually multiple rounds of pursuing a prospect before you move on. And so the first round of attempts we call round one. And it can start on day one of your outreach with, let's start by sending an email, sending a cold email. And then days 2 through 7 can include call attempts without a voicemail message. Now, remember, because we're not leaving a voicemail message, we can call more frequently. So we could call every day, call many times during days 2 through 7 and during this first week. And then we progress to week 2 of round 1. And at this point, we've sent an email, we've called them many times without leaving a voicemail message. So on day 8, we're now going to call, and if we get their voicemail box again and don't reach them, at this point, now we're going to leave a voicemail message. Right after we leave our voicemail message, because it's our best practice, we're going to send a voicemail follow-up email that is paired and aligned with the voicemail message that we leave. And now, because we've left a voicemail message, we're going to pause for the remainder of week 2 and not reach out to the prospect with emails or calls for the rest of that week. Now, regarding what we say in our cold email and what we say in our voicemail message and what we say in our voicemail follow-up email, we can use actually some of our sales message and use part of our sales message to start to try to educate the prospect on who we are, why we're calling, why it's worth their valuable time to talk with us at some point. And we can use one building block for round 1. And so for this, we're going to use our value points building block. So it's a value points cold email on day 1 and a value points voicemail message and a value points voicemail follow-up email. At this point, this is the end of round 1. And now we're progressing to round 2, which starts in week 3. And there's a bunch of steps here, but the reality is that these steps are exactly the same as week 1. It's the first day of round 2, and we're sending a second cold email, and then we're calling with many call attempts without a voicemail. We progress to week 4. At this point, we're going to leave our second voicemail, and then we're going to send a follow-up email, and then we're going to pause again. So this is exactly like round 1, except we're going to use a different message for round 2. And since we used our value points building block for round 1, what we could actually use is our pain points building block for round 2. So our second cold email on day 15 is our pain points cold email. And then the voicemail that we leave is a pain points voicemail message and a pain points follow-up email. And then we're pausing for the remainder of week 4. If we still don't hear back from the prospect or get a hold of them, we progress to round 3, starting on week 5. And week 5 starts with our third cold email. And again, while you see a bunch of steps here, this is exactly like round 1 and round 2. Everything is exactly the same. The only thing that's different is a different message. It's a different email, and it's a different voicemail and a different voicemail follow-up email. And what we can use for round 3 is our name drop building block. So we use a name drop cold email, name drop voicemail follow-up email, and then we're pausing for the remainder of week 6. And if we still don't get a hold of a prospect, if we still want to continue to try to pursue this prospect, we can progress to round 4. Same exact steps, only a different message. And at this point, we can use our product building block, which is a more direct, this is what I sell approach. And in previous training modules, I've actually advised against product selling. But the logic here is we've sent multiple emails, we've left a few voicemails, and we've tried to communicate in a more consultative way. At this point, we're going to start to be a little bit more direct and have it more of a product selling message and product selling voicemail. And I'm okay with that. And how this compares to other salespeople is this is the type of messaging that they usually start with in another salesperson's equivalent of round 1 and their first email and their first voicemail. So in your case, at least you're getting to your product, very direct message towards the end of your prospecting. And actually round 4 is the end of this prospecting cadence. So you've been pursuing this prospect for 8 weeks. If you get to the end of round 4, you've left 4 voicemails, 4 different cold emails, 4 different voicemail follow-up emails. And at this point, I think if you were to walk away, you're not walking away prematurely. You've definitely tried to reach this person, and you could mark this person as unreachable, and you close them as a prospect that you're pursuing, and you move on to reach other prospects. So while you could debate this prospecting cadence and say this is too much outreach, you could be very confident that you're not walking away prematurely. So those are the two things you're trying to avoid here. You're trying to avoid pursuing too much and reaching out too much, and you're also trying to avoid walking away prematurely. At least with this, you can be confident that when you walk away, you've tried your best to try to get a hold of them, and this is just someone that you're not able to reach, that they're never going to answer your call, and you could walk away. So this is what that prospecting cadence looks like when you put it all together. And like I said, it looks like a lot of different steps and complexity. Every round is exactly the same. So once you're familiar with what you're doing, it just repeats itself, and the only thing that changes is your message. And while that actually looks kind of complicated with all those different steps, it's actually very simple, because we could really simplify all of those steps by just looking at it, that the fact that the first week of round 1, all you're doing is sending a cold email and then calling without leaving a voicemail. You progress to the next round, and now all you're doing is, in the early part of that second week, is calling and leaving a voicemail if you don't get a hold of them, and then you're sending a voicemail follow-up email, and then you're pausing for the remainder of week 2. So it's pretty simple there if you really kind of break down what's going on, even though there were a bunch of different boxes when we would look at it the other way. And then once you understand that it's fairly simple here what you're doing in each week of the round, the other rounds just basically are exactly the same, and they just copy one onto the other. All you're really doing is changing the message, and the message should already be created, so not a lot of complexity there. So as you can see, that is just one way to look at this prospecting cadence in a more simplified way, in that, yes, it's a lot of outreach and a lot of different steps, but it's pretty simple when you kind of group together all the different things you're doing. Okay, so that's the prospecting cadence. That's some structure that you can use for how many times to reach out, when to walk away, whether or not to keep pursuing a prospect. Now let's talk about organizational movement. And what organizational movement is moving throughout an organization to try to find a different way in. So if you have an account that you're trying to get into, and you maybe have the title of an individual and maybe a name of a person that you're trying to reach out to, that person might appear to be difficult to get a hold of. And if you can't get a hold of that person, instead of just closing that account and that contact as unreachable and moving on to pursue a different account, you definitely have the option of trying to find someone else at that account to reach out to and to get a hold of. And that's what organizational movement is that it is trying to find another contact to reach out to. And by finding more than one contact to reach out to, improve your odds of getting in, because we know that prospects rarely answer their phone. So if we're trying to reach out to 2 prospects at the same account, and each prospect is difficult to get a hold of, but by adding another prospect, we increase the odds of our ability to get a hold of one of those people. So organizational movement can improve your odds of getting into the account that you're trying to get into, instead of just closing that contact as unreachable and moving on to try to pursue other accounts. So I'm going to provide some structure here for organizational movement. There's actually 2 different types of organizational movement that I want to talk about. The first one being vertical movement. So let's just say hypothetically that you're trying to reach the VP of a department, maybe the VP of IT. And certainly VPs of IT are very difficult to get a hold of. There are a lot of salespeople that are calling the VP of IT. You have hardware salespeople, software salespeople, IT services and consulting salespeople that are trying to reach the VP of IT. Definitely a very difficult person to get on the phone. But instead of just calling the VP of IT a lot of times and then marking them as unreachable and not pursuing that account, we have some options. So once we've called the VP of IT and they're not answering their phone, we can move up and down vertically in that department. So the VP of IT certainly reports into a CIO. So we could move on from calling the VP of IT and then start to try to reach out to the CIO. Now, I'm not saying that the CIO is going to be easier to reach than the VP of IT, but instead of just moving on, by us adding another person into our prospecting cadence, we increase our odds of getting into the account or getting a hold of someone. And you can also move down the organization as well. Below the VP of IT is likely a director of IT, and we can add the director of IT in our prospecting cadence as well. So by expanding and moving up and down the organization, all of these people could still be difficult to get a hold of, but we can improve our chances of getting in. And by the way, when you go down, typically the people are more accessible and easier to get a hold of. We could also do what we call horizontal movement, which is moving laterally throughout the organization to other departments. So now remember, we've been prospecting so far into IT and we can't get a hold of anybody. At this point, we could move to other departments in an organization, because most likely if you're selling B2B, your product or service can likely be sold into multiple departments. So yes, maybe we sell some sort of software product and we often talk to the IT department. There's likely other departments that our software impacts. For example, it could be very likely that your software impacts the operations department. So if we've been trying to reach IT, can't get a hold of anybody, let's start to call operations. And so if we're trying to reach the VP of IT, we could then start to move on to try to reach the VP of operations. Or if we've moved on to try to reach the director of IT, we can also try to reach the director of operations. And so if you look at the org chart, what that might look like is, instead of just calling the VP of IT and then not getting a hold of that person and then moving on to another account, we can expand our prospecting to all of these different people. And by calling these different people, you can see how you can increase the odds of getting into the account. Because yes, all of these people might be difficult to get a hold of, but by calling these different people, we might have a chance of catching someone or finding someone that ends up answering their phone or is more accessible. So that is what we call organizational movement. Now you can actually combine organizational movement with your prospecting cadence, and let me show you what that looks like. So let's say that we start our prospecting cadence with that VP of IT. So we go through week one using our value points building block. We've left them a voicemail, we pause. Still, we're just focusing on the VP of IT. Now we're progressing to week 3, which is round 2 of our cadence. Now we've moved on, trying to reach them with our pain points building block. We still can't get a hold of them. We're actually into week 4 of trying to reach the VP of IT. Left a voicemail, now we're pausing. At the end of round 2, this is a great place to add organizational movement. At this point, we can then move up and down or horizontally in the organization to find one new contact that we can reach out to. And a great place to go for this, or tool to use if you don't have that second contact to add to your prospecting cadence, a great place to go is LinkedIn. So you could do a search on the company, do a search on different departments or by title, find a second person to start reaching out to. And once you find that person, you add the new person to round 1, week 1 of your prospecting cadence. So at this point, you're doing the exact same thing that you've been doing already to the new contact. And at this point, you now have 2 people in your prospecting cadence for that particular account. And I personally think this is a good manageable number. If you have a few different accounts that you're trying to get into, at this point, you have 2 different contacts that you're pursuing with pretty good concentration. And you're also doing this in parallel with other accounts that you're trying to get into. Certainly, if you only have one account, you could do more than just a couple people. But if you have a number of different accounts that you're trying to get into, at this point, you're just focused on 2 people. And the way that would work is that once you then progress throughout your prospecting cadence, if you reach the end of round 4 with the first contact, let's say that was the VP of IT, that person's going to fall off and be classified as unreachable. And right when that person falls off, we then reach the end of round 2 for the second contact. And at that point, we then find a new contact. And so at this point, one falls off and then one becomes added. And then we continue with 2 different prospects at that account in our prospecting cadence. So that's a great way to add organizational movement with your prospecting cadence. And by the way, I just want to point out, if it's not clear already, you don't have to follow this exactly. You don't have to worry about, okay, what day is it and what step am I on? But the key point here is to have a very concentrated approach, continue trying to reach out, because these people are difficult to get a hold of. And we're going to have to call them and reach out in a lot of different ways with a lot of different attempts. And as we're reaching out, we're going to need to, at key points, we're going going to need to find new people to be reaching out to. And you don't want to reach out to too many people and get too many people that you're trying to pursue. Have a very balanced approach. And this is what I consider to be a very thorough yet balanced approach when you add in that organizational movement. All right, the last thing that we're going to talk about here is what I call concentrated prospecting. And at the most basic level, this is just to focus on a concentrated, basically a short list of prospects instead of working a large set of prospects. And sort of a metaphor I want to use here to kind of explain this concept is, instead of being a mile wide and an inch deep, I recommend, regarding the prospecting list that you're working, the contacts that you're trying to pursue, I recommend you be a mile deep and an inch wide. And just to let you know, a background story on where this thought comes from is that there was one project that I gave. I had a really good salesperson working for me, and she did a great job. And there was one campaign that I gave her, and I gave her a list of 500 contacts to reach out to and to set appointments with. And what I found was that the salesperson was great with all other tasks that I gave her. And on this particular campaign, she had almost zero results in terms of scheduling appointments and generating leads. And so I sat down with her, I looked at what she was doing, and what she was doing was she had a list of 500 contacts, and she started at the top of the list and was working her way down to the bottom of the list of 500, calling each contact one time. And what I realized was that because contacts are so difficult to get a hold of, I needed her to pursue each contact more. And so instead of just working the list from the top to the bottom, I took that list back from her, and I took the first 50 contacts and I gave her only 50 contacts to work. And I said, work these and either schedule appointments with them or remove contacts from the list as unreachable after you've called them a number of times. And when you get down to like 20, let me know and I'll fill you back up to 50. And so I just made that small change, and she immediately started scheduling appointments and generating leads. And it was because of that more focused approach on a smaller number of contacts. And that's the equivalent of being more a mile deep and an inch wide, where she's working 50 contacts instead of 500. And so if you want to improve your ability to get a hold of contacts, this is what I call more concentrated prospecting. So you can either apply this to your own prospecting, or if you're setting up a campaign for someone, this may be something you want to consider. And so the execution on this is pretty simple. What you would want is you'd want your master list of leads or contacts. So that might be your list of 500, could be 1,000. It's typically a long list of contacts or accounts that you want to go after. But if you're working those or you're giving that list to someone, you want to also build an attack list, which this is a short list, a very focused list of contacts. So if you're going to give someone or give yourself a set of contacts, I think a good number of contacts to have a very concentrated approach on is between 20 to 50. So I think that's the right number, where you can call them multiple times through the week and continue to go back to that same set of contacts multiple times in a week and go through the prospecting cadence that I just showed you. And that can improve your ability to get a hold of those prospects and to more effectively work that list, especially if you're going to incorporate some sort of prospecting cadence like I showed you that has multiple outreach attempts. Now, I can't tell you the right number of accounts to put on an attack list, because the larger the account is, the fewer the number of accounts that you should be going after. For example, if you're going after small businesses, the number of accounts on your attack list could be the same as contacts, could be between 20 to 50. But if you're going after very large organizations, the number of accounts on your attack list could be between 5 to 10. It could be one account, if it's a large global multinational corporation. But the takeaway here is less is more. Have a very focused set of contacts or accounts that you're going after, and then work to disqualify them as either not needing what you sell or being unreachable, and then add more in as you work through that attack list. All right, so that's pretty much it. As I mentioned, getting a hold of prospects, getting engaged, getting connected, getting your foot in the door is the biggest challenge. Hopefully, these are 3 things that can help you with that, and you definitely have a lot of control over these 3 areas. So don't stress too much about the things you can't control, like the competition and prospects being in meetings all day. You can't control any of that. You can control all of these 3 things, and hopefully that helps you to get connected with prospects. All right, so that's pretty much it for this training module. The next training module, we are going to focus on objections, objection handling, how to get around objections, how to respond to objections, and we look forward to seeing you there. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If you got at least one tip out of this training module and you want to return the favor, very easy for you to do. Simply like, comment, share this video, subscribe to our channel. Any or all of those help us tremendously. None of those cost you anything. If that's interesting but you don't know what to do next, you may want to check out my book that aligns with that YouTube training program called The Smart Sales System, Sell Smarter, Not Harder, and you can get that on Amazon here. That's pretty much it. If you have questions, you want more information, the best place to go is salescriptor.com. There are more tips, there are more videos. You can sign up to receive some ebooks for free, and there is a chat window that you can ask us questions if you have questions about any of this. If you want to learn more about the SalesScriptor product, there's plenty of product information, or you can purchase SalesScriptor there, but that's pretty much it. Hope this was helpful. Thanks for being here. Thanks for staying to the end of the video, and we will see you on the next one. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.